health officials. It's a condition that's thought to affect up to half of the population, but new guidance says drugs like paracetamol and ibuprofen can do more harm than good, leading to addiction in some cases. Instead, it's recommended GPs prescribe treatments like acupuncture or even exercise to help patients. Demi Green reports.
For 17 years, Keisha has lived with endometriosis, a disorder that affects the womb and leaves sufferers in chronic pain. And for much of that time, the only treatment she's been offered was painkillers, more and more and more of them.
So I've been prescribed tramadol, and I was prescribed tramadol for about a year and a half, and they kept just giving me that. Codeine, I was on that for, I'd say, probably about 5 years. They just kept giving me it, and I take that probably 4 times a day, every day, because they kept saying, just take the painkillers, just take the painkillers, and then the Proxine on top of that as well.
From today, doctors in England will be receiving new advice on the prescription of painkillers like paracetamol and ibuprofen, aimed at reducing their usage. It's now believed that taking them and other commonly used drugs has no effect in cases where patients suffer pain not caused by an injury or a medical condition.
All medications come with side effects, as we know, and even simple painkillers like paracetamol and ibuprofen can have effects on the stomach and on the kidneys. So if they're not actually working for chronic pain syndromes, then really doctors like myself should be questioning why we are prescribing them.
According to recent figures, 28 million adults suffer from chronic pain in the UK. That's defined as pain lasting more than 3 months. In England, there were 23.4 million prescriptions written for aspirin in 2018, 18.5 million prescriptions for paracetamol, and more than 5 million opioid prescriptions. Those in particular have long been associated with problems of dependency and addiction.
The problem when people stop taking prescription drugs and they start looking for alternatives once they're addicted is that they will go to other avenues which are not legal, that take illicit drugs.
Keisha's years of taking powerful painkillers left her with damage to her digestive system. She hopes the new guidelines will help people like her question whether there are other ways to help. David Green, ITV News, in West Yorkshire.
The Attorney General